welcome to FDH Lounge mini episode 1828. You have with you here today FDH Lounge original dignitaries Rick Morris, Jason Jones, Chris Galloway, and hopefully you caught us live during the NFL draft for FDH Lounge episode 54. We're calling it that because it was full length, just like the old days back at the old Sports Talk Network. But here we are going to break down the 2025 NFL draft. All of us have a lot of thoughts. This was a draft that was historic in a lot of ways, and we're going to get into all of that and much, much more. I know that these guys are bursting at the seams, perhaps no one more so than you, Jason Jones. You have thoughts.
I do. So first off, I just want to say, if you did watch the pre-show, I definitely am still not extremely excited about the trade back, and it's going to take me a while to get over that. I can say, though, that, like, I get it. Like, I'm not trying to bag on Mason Graham. I think he's going to be very, very good. But it'll take me a while to get over that. With that being said, there was some movement. There is some, we've already discussed, there's some value issues that we have. But in general, I think if you sort of step back from it and just kind of look at the players acquired, at least if we're talking about the Browns, I don't know how you don't feel good about it, just in general. Now, real quick, there's going to be some thoughts shared today and moving forward on the Shedeur pick. I'm pretty sure that everywhere in the country right now where draft is being discussed, Shedeur is going to be part of that conversation. To everybody that was watching the draft and getting annoyed with them asking, is this when Shedeur goes? I could have predicted that. But I'll let everybody have their piece, but just suffice it to say that there is the perception of Shedeur. There is the behavior up until the draft. And then there's the kid we saw, or at least that I saw, when he was still around in the second round. And to Browns fans or anybody that wants to drag that pick, you're entitled to your opinion. But I'm cautioning the people to wait, reserve judgment, because if what I saw plays out, and that's just his new approach because he probably realized that this approach didn't work. By the way, Shiloh Sanders hired Drew Rosenhaus in the middle of day 3. Basically saying that this process that we had planned just didn't work. So I'm going to let everybody get into their opinions on the Shedeur thing, and then we'll circle back. But just rest assured knowing that I feel like the Shedeur we're about to get is different than everyone else is expecting. And it's all based on some little itty-bitty behavioral, body language, word choice type stuff that we saw on day 2 and day 3.
Okay. All right. Chris Galloway, you also, I know, have thoughts.
I mean, so we're going to start off, obviously, with talking about the Browns draft, and because it was the most unique 3 days that any team had. I mean, it was different. It was historical in that no one had ever taken 2 quarterbacks and 2 running backs in the first 5 rounds before in NFL history. I don't think they planned it that way. I mean, they made it kind of clear they didn't plan it that way, and it's just kind of how it worked out. And obviously, the Shedeur thing, I got a lot of thoughts on. Initially, I too was initially disappointed in the move down. I wanted Hunter for the same reasons I think a lot of Browns fans did, is that it's been a long time since we've had a dynamic playmaker. No offense to Nick Chubb, he was fantastic. But outside of him, we haven't really had a guy that you could be excited about for a long time. We had our brief moment with Gordon one season, but he couldn't stay clean. So I was excited about having a weapon, right? And potentially a weapon on both sides of the ball. Now, I understand from an analytic standpoint why they did what they did, right? They moved down. They got a great football player in Mason Graham. They got a guy who's going to stuff the run for a decade. They have a different body type, but and again, I comps are tough, but I see Mason Graham as kind of a Cam Hayward sort of guy you build that line around for a decade. I think he's going to instill leadership and toughness that we really need on that side of the ball. And I said this on draft night, as I was frantically driving through Illinois and northern Indiana. Um, you want to help out Miles Garrett. It was Mason Graham was the better choice than Abdul Carter. Mason Graham is the guy that's going to collapse the pocket up the middle, force that quarterback out, should be extremely helpful to Miles Garrett and helping him achieve his goals as a player this year. So I think it's a great pick. He's a clean player. The film is excellent. He's probably the best defensive lineman in Michigan history. He's a winner. I mean, and he's clearly a quality guy, right? We all saw about what happened with his teammate. Was not drafted, was expected to be drafted. The cornerback, um, and he was done with his media interviews, and he could have left for his parties and celebrations, and he went back in the green room and stayed with his friend, his teammate. I love character guys like that. I just do. And so when you talk about him and you talk about, Schlesinger, apparently everybody with the UCLA program just can't say enough good things about him in terms of leadership and quality human being. And he's a tackling machine, fast, lateral, a tackling machine. What's not to like? We've complained for years that they've given short shrift to defensive tackles and linebackers, other than the JOK pick. And so we go out and we get the Big Ten, a first team All American, first team Big Ten um, player. Well, that he's probably pretty damn good. Um, so yeah, you could talk about value and could you have gotten him instead at in the 40s or something, traded back a little bit. Yeah, maybe. Judkins is a hammer at running back. I mean, I want to talk to them really as a you got thunder and lightning between Judkins and Sampson. I mean, you completely rebuilt that running back room instantly with two guys that are dynamic. Um, I mean, that's an A+ draft there in terms of running back. You guys both know that I loved Harold Fannin Jr. I think he fits the Stefanski offense to be paired up as a tight end. H-back type player, move him around, chess piece. He catches everything. He's 20 years old. He fits everything the Browns want to do. I mean, I love the kid. I watched him at Bowling Green with just in awe, and I was so thrilled when they pulled the trigger on him. Now, all that being said, um, I understand the strategy of taking two quarterbacks. I predicted they would do so. Because at this point, if you're the Browns in 30 plus years of futility, you've got to take shots at this point. Try to find a guy that's worthy of development, that can develop, and that you can turn into a quality starter. My concerns on Shador Sanders, and I know that there's nobody that knows Shador better than Jason. My concerns on Shador always were, that he has the ability to be, the 18th best quarterback in the NFL kind of player, solid starter, quality, talent. My concern with Shedeur Sanders has always been the circus, the maturity, the entitlement, the nonsense. His father. Yeah, I mean, I'm saying it, his father. And I know there's people on TV going, well, you can't hold it against him. You know what? You're hiring for your corporation. You can hold it against him. Because when you had Dion out there for a year saying we're going to dictate where he goes and he's going to be a top 3 pick and we're going to this and we're going to that, and the kids only, and I pointed this out in our pre-draft show, and then finally after I had said it, I finally saw on draft day a couple people finally say it, which was he's only had one coach. He's always had it handed to him. So I think there are real questions about maturity, how well he's going to take coaching. I think those are all legitimate questions, and I think that is why he fell. I don't think it was, some have suggested racism or some other, I think it's just teams look, they're a corporation, they've got to deal with things, and you have coaches. And I worry that Stefanski isn't strong enough to handle the Sanders circus.
He may not be. I have two.
I have criticized Sanders or Stefanski the last 2 years by telling you that I think that he's just been too beta male. And I worry now this Sanders thing is going to derail everything.
Well, possibly. Now, I have two follow-ups to things you said. Number one, everything about Fannin, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, I think you said a lot of the same things about Harrison Bryant, and they never got the most out of him. He's gone in Philadelphia now, where he'll flourish. He'll flourish in Philly. He'll flourish with a real team. So that's my first thought, is that I've heard this before about these, developmental tight ends of the Browns. The other thing being Sanders, all right, he gets slotted in salary-wise, right, as a fifth-round guy in the salary pool. Not a guy that sees himself as a fifth-round guy. I personally can't wait. The way that this whole thing was racialized over the weekend by the No Justice, No Peace crowd, we're going to have Al Sharpton. If they go to pay him a fifth-round slot, he'll be with a bullhorn out there in Berea yelling "No Justice, No Peace" through a bullhorn, and I'm here for it. This is going to be wildly entertaining because the team.
That's just so nonsense. That's just silly, stupid shit, Rick. That he's getting his 1.2 million because that's his salary slot.
You think he's going to roll over for that? I don't know.
He doesn't have a choice. That's the collective bargaining.
Well, it's roughly in there. I don't know that it's necessarily a mandated number.
I'm
not concerned about that.
Okay.
Has been able to negotiate a contract. They get what they get based on where they're drafted. Now, Sharpton or whoever doesn't have to like that, but
I'm just extrapolating that might happen. But that's a thing where, to the larger thing there, and I'm surprised that I agree with Chris on any of his take about the Browns, but as far as the whole thing about, yes, one of the biggest things was, the biggest sinkhole in this organization has been the circus in the locker room, caused by the failure at the quarterback position and everything that's gone along with that. What's this going to do for team chemistry? You drafted this guy behind Dylan Gabriel. Dylan Gabriel.
I didn't want him.
Dylan Gabriel should be higher on the draft.
Sanders goes to Pittsburgh. I trust that organization and those veterans in that locker room and Mike Tomlin to manage the situation.
Yeah.
I don't trust Stefanski to be able to manage it at all.
Yeah.
I just don't. He hasn't shown any ability. He couldn't manage the Baker stuff with OBJ. He was weak in handling that. He's been weak in handling Myles Garrett. I mean, he's just not a strong personality. And I liked the Gabriel pick from the standpoint of all those character qualities that everybody said about him. He was a winner every program he was at. Leadership, he oozes leadership. He was a hard worker. Those are the things I haven't seen out of Shedeur Sanders at all. Now,
but I mean, Gabriel is Case Keenum / Don Strock. That's who
what I hope is that Jason is right, that this is a humbling experience, right? You know, I don't want to see him walk into the facility with the big money sign, legendary, and all this bullshit, right? That's what teams don't want in a backup quarterback. Right. And that's why no one was drafting him.
You're feeding the collusion crowd by saying that. You're feeding all the folks out there.
Because every team can individually decide, I don't want the circus.
That is true. That is true.
There doesn't have to be collusion for adults running multi-billion-dollar corporations to go, I don't want that as the face of my franchise and my corporation.
Well,
right? That's what did Shedeur in. The bullshit interviews, the attitude, the entitlement, all the nonsense we've heard that went on in the year prior to the draft. And then he wouldn't work out. He wouldn't do this. He wouldn't do that. And people, you know what? Individual teams just went, fuck it. We're not engaging in this. And so he fell like a rock. And it had nothing to do with his ability on the field.
Right.
It had to do with everything else.
Well, here's the thing.
And I don't blame them one bit. And I don't like the pick because I didn't want that for the Browns. I wanted what we got in Graham. I wanted what we got in our other players in this draft. I wanted leadership. I wanted men who wanted football first. And I just
Well,
don't think Sanders is that. Now look, maybe he turns it around. Maybe he realizes, you know what, if I'm going to reach anywhere near my father's what he
yeah,
accomplished, I'm going to have to be a serious football man. I mean, maybe,
yeah,
maybe he'll
maybe.
figure it out, but I don't have a lot of faith in it.
Well, but Chris, yes and no on the ability part. The way the world works is if he had the ability to be a slam dunk early first round pick, teams would have overlooked it. He didn't, and that's why he fell like he did. I've used the term for a long time, the Sam Tebow syndrome, that it's a thing where coaches, in most cases, will make the calculation that you're not worth the distraction. I go, Michael Sam, Tim Tebow, radically different things here. And there are people that were greatly in sympathy with both of these individuals, but both of them, for what they brought on the field, coaches did not feel that it was worth the media circus. And by the way, I'm not putting this on Michael Sam or Tim Tebow. It's the media. It's the media. You're going to have the ESPN satellites on the front lawn, screaming A. Smith, barking into a microphone in front of the practice facility in Berea. Coaches don't want that. Coaches don't want the circus. GMs, to a certain extent, don't want that either. It doesn't affect them as directly, but they don't want that. And that's where, again, that is interesting, Jason, that you seem to think that won't be the case with Sanders coming to Berea.
I want to make sure you guys get it all out because I'm going to have to go counterpoint on most of this.
Go ahead. This is what we're here for.
So here's the first thing. Is there a circus? Yes. Is that circus the Tebow circus? No. Now, the big indicator, before I get going here, the big indicator, the one thing I'm going to tell you, if they agree to this, now my concerns grow a little bit. And don't get me wrong, the person I'm about to talk about is a great dude. What he's doing is great work. It's not something I think Browns fans, Browns players, or the organization would necessarily want. So I hope that they will find a nice, polite way to say, I appreciate it, but no. And that is Bucky.
Okay.
Bucky is Deion Sanders Jr. He's the guy that if you ever were to watch any of the well-off media stuff, that's him. When you see video, especially on game day, I'm sure people have seen this because I've never seen it before, where there's a huddle on the field during like a TV timeout.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see a guy walk out with a camera who's never been there before. Like you have never seen a random camera guy walk up while a huddle's happening.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we don't want. And if they
Risk for the mill, Jason, content. It's all content.
Yeah. And if they green light and give Bucky access to come and go freely, then I'm a little bit more worried about the circus coming. If that doesn't happen, and let's be honest, Deion Sanders is going to be worried about Colorado. Could they play a game on Saturday morning and him be in Cleveland for a Sunday game? Yeah, that's possible. But he's not going to be here. Deion's not going to be in Cleveland being helicopter dad. The circus that occurs is going to occur almost exclusively in the form of social media. There are going to be an army of fans who are now Browns fans, which basically means they're not Browns fans. They're not loyal to the Browns. They're loyal to Shador or Deion or whatever.
We saw that with all the Oklahoma chodes with Baker Mayfield.
Oh, I made that point to a Browns fan last night.
Yeah.
I said, if you didn't like it when the Sooner fans jumped on and they were like, "Ooh, we're Browns fans now," strap in because that's about to happen. Matter of fact, just for the fun of it, I pulled this up just to let everybody know. That is what I would call Brownie Uncles 1 and 2.
Okay.
And I might as well explain this. So in the CU fan base, and it was there with the Jackson State fan base, they have what are called prime aunties or aunties, however you want to pronounce it. And these are just people. They're regular people. They're not related to the Sanders family at all. They just, social media-wise, just sort of lay in the weeds. And they wait for people to say things that are unfair or mean about the Sanders family, right? So if you go in there, let's say Shador plays and he throws 3 interceptions, which I don't think would ever happen. Grain of salt with that. If that were to happen and a bunch of people were online and they were like, "Hey, you really shouldn't have made that throw in the third quarter," they're not going to care about that. You start saying things like, oh, Shedeur Sanders is just an entitled, cocky SOB, they're going to come for you. So they'll be there. So that's what the circus was. It's not going to be like Tebow, where there's like billboards everywhere and local news is covering practices when they never did before. It's not going to be tangible like that. Now, is there going to be an influx of attention? Yes, there will be. And there will be for a little while. If he doesn't, if he's like QB3, that'll quiet down pretty quick. All right. Now, addressing the larger elephants in the room.
Okay.
So, yes, there will be a circus. It just won't be the circus people are afraid it's going to be. Deion, again, Deion's the crux of this, and we'll come back to that. And the one thing, Chris, that you did said that is a concern, and it should be a concern for everybody, and that is the fact that he's never been coached by anybody else. There was some, I don't know if it's a report or if it was just people talking, but I did hear something yesterday coming out of the Giants, where they suggested that when Shedeur wasn't prepared for the meeting, and I totally understand that was probably a thing. When they went through and Dable was grilling him on the whiteboard and he wasn't prepared for it and Dable called him out, apparently he didn't react well to that. But again, this all comes back to a concept, and I'm tying this all back to Deion. All the legendary stuff, that's by design, obviously, right? That's Deion's idea. Deion in 1989 invented the primetime persona because he's an introvert. He's not wired to be the talkative guy that we came to learn to know. So he invented that persona so that he could do that. And then as he became a pro, then he started marketing himself. That's why people today are saying he's one of the greatest marketers in sports. So there was always this idea, there's got to be a buzz term. There's got to be a word that you can drop all the time, and that becomes your branding. Because if you can brand yourself and you're a great football player and all these things will happen, and then now you maximize, your market value or whatever. So the two legendary stuff, all the background and the couch and the specialty shelf that had all the hats and all that, that's Deion. That's Deion saying you got to be as extra as possible. Now, going back to what I was saying, as we watched this whole thing unfold, you saw a different Shedeur. And in my opinion, I think you saw the Shedeur that Deion is probably convinced Shedeur that he shouldn't show the world. You need to be this persona, and that's what people will watch. That's what people will enjoy. And then Shedeur is a different person. Just like I've told people all the time when they say, hey, what's it like knowing Deion? I don't know Deion. I have never met Deion a day in my life. I know Coach Prime. I know Primetime because he's very guarded. And he would tell you there are probably less than 20 people in the world right now that know Deion Sanders. And it's the same concept. All of this is being passed along. Now, if we forget about Shedeur for a second, a year and a half ago, when Jordan Seaton, 5-star offensive tackle, agreed to play for Colorado, when he went on his press tour, you didn't see a lot of jewelry. You didn't see he wasn't driving a fancy car. He's an offensive tackle at Colorado who is following the same blueprint. He's driving a Maybach. He has jewelry that should be weighing his neck down. And it's all a show. And it's all this idea that you've got to create this image of yourself. Now, what we saw on day 2 and day 3 was Shedeur shedding that persona and not leaning into that anymore. So while it is only a hope of mine, but I feel like it's a very informed hope, I don't think we're getting legendary. I don't think that Maybach rolls up to Berea. I think he will probably show up in a modest vehicle wearing modest clothes, and he will do what he needs to do because he saw his dream flash before his eyes. And in all the time I've been around him, I can count on one hand the number of times I saw the Shedeur we saw on day 2 and day 3. So yes, there are lots of concerns and lots of perception and lots of things that you can pull from over the last 2 years that say this is kind of a scary proposition. Now, I think he's going to be – I hate the word humble. I really do because it makes it sound
in
like
his
somebody,
DNA. He's not going to be.
Right, and this is what I want to explain to people. If you're expecting him to be the guy that, you see at a Guardians game, all guardianed out, and he's rah-rah for the city, I don't know if he'll be that. He may come around to that idea. But here's the thing. People are saying humbled. He's not humbled. He's the notion that legendary is dead. No, that's not the thing. I think he realizes that this approach was bad, that this approach is what made him fall. If you don't want a culture change, don't get me. Stuff like that. Those were bad ideas. He was getting bad advice. So if he comes in here and he sheds some of that stuff and he's like, I'm here to play ball, and he decides he's going to win QB2 or QB3 job in camp, I don't think most of the things we're talking about we would have to worry about.
Well,
he's not going to bring an entourage into the locker room. He's not going to do a lot of the things that he's been doing to this point because, as Chris mentioned, he was the prince of the castle, so to speak. Were things made for him specifically to do well? Yeah. Did they throw the ball 80% of the time because the running game was that bad? Maybe, but probably not. They ran it because they threw it because they were showcasing Shedeur. So that stuff's not going to happen. But I understand the concern. I just want everyone to kind of just take a breath and think, I don't think that's the guy we're getting. Now, as far as his viability as a quarterback on the field, I think what they did in this draft sets up so beautifully for him. My personal opinion, and I don't expect everybody to agree with me, I think if he's serious and there's little distraction, I think he beats Dylan Gabriel in camp, and it's not even effing close. Not close. The things that Gabriel does well, so does Shedeur. The things that Gabriel can't do well, Shedeur still does pretty well. So I think he beats Dylan Gabriel, no problem. And then it's a question of Pickett and how much they love Pickett. But I think he'll be on the game day roster. Here's where it gets interesting, though. If you're putting him on last year's team, I got concerns, right? I mean, you still have the same issues with the offensive line, but now you're putting Fannin opposite Njoku. You still got Judy. You just need a wide receiver that's not awful. And we're going to run the crap out of the ball, right? Everyone agrees, based on what we're seeing, the two tight end set, 12 personnel, Judkins is an absolute hammer. They're going to run the ball, right?
Don't forget the turnstile at left tackle, Jason.
Well, yeah, okay. We haven't talked about this, but I am under every assumption, and this is probably me skating on thin ice. I am under the assumption that the new kid, Teller, not Wyatt Teller, the new guy they got, who's like a swing tackle at Chicago or something. Okay. I think that's the right tackle. Jack Conklin is gone. And DeJuan Jones is left tackle after hearing, I forgot who it was, but somebody said they saw him at an event and he looked really good, looked like he was under 340. So I'm hoping that that's the case, right?
How you look on the banquet circuit is, of course, of paramount importance. So that's
yeah, of course. Yeah. So I'm just thinking if they're going to run the ball more effectively, right? Because we can agree that Judkins is probably 5 times the back that Ford is. And then they're going to have 2 tight end sets, 11 and 12 personnel. I don't think that the quarterback, whoever it is going to go in there and be throwing 350 yards every week. So I actually think this sets up nicely for Shedeur. I'm not going to say he'll be the starter. However, my optimistic fan brain has flirted with the Brady Bledsoe situation. If maybe he eventually gets to QB2 or if Pickett gets hurt or something, and then Flacco takes a shot, maybe he ends up starting that way. Otherwise, I don't necessarily see him starting, but I don't think that's the point. The idea is to have him, get him on the game day roster, and then maybe at some point give him reps or let him start a game in like week 16 or 17 to see what we have, because here comes the big one, right?
Sure, yeah.
And then I'll relinquish the floor for you guys.
Well, a couple things here. Just in another moment or so, we got to pivot because it's been entertaining as hell, but there were 31 other teams that drafted too. Now, not all of the 31 teams merit attention. A lot of them merit no attention.
They didn't have anywhere near as interesting a draft. So
no, that's clearly the case. But I think it's one of these deals where ultimately you have to take a look and you have to see what the Browns were doing here. My one thought, Jason, is that in terms of is this an organization, again, of all the organizations in the league, you've been wheeling out the human form of a staph infection at quarterback for 3 years now. So in terms of any of this split personality stuff, and gee, I hope the right guy shows up. Is this the organization you want to put him in?
No,
So there's
no.
that.
I mean, like, understandably, if I'm Dion or Pilar or anybody in their family,
yeah,
and I'm looking at this a month ago,
yeah,
and we're just looking at rosters and history and how each team runs itself and all that
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, I would understand if I'm a fly on the wall and they were like, I don't know that Cleveland's a great idea. Like, I can totally understand that.
yeah.
Now, my hope is that it'll work out anyway. But if we allow ourselves real quick, and I just want to drop this chum in the water.
Okay.
Just for a moment, I know it's not realistic today, but just for a moment, let's just assume, for the sake of this conversation, that Shedeur finds himself as QB2 at some point. And then they go, well, we got to figure out what he's got. And they roll him out against, I don't know, the New York Jets or something. And he goes out and he plays really well. And he's managing the offense. Everything's moving. It looks good. And they have a moment where they say, okay, maybe we don't need to take a quarterback this year. And I know people are spitting their drink all over their keyboards or whatever right now. Just run with this for a second. 2 draft picks for the first round that are specifically chosen to go draft a quarterback. And let's just get crazy with this and say everybody's involved, from Arch Manning to Lenora Sellers, right?
Okay.
If there are 5 teams that desperately need a quarterback, that's what they're chasing, right? If we've got 2 picks in our pocket and we decide that we don't need a quarterback in 2026, ask yourself, what else is at the top of that draft that we would love to waste 2 first-round draft picks to go get? It's not a quarterback.
Okay. All right. You do know Jeremiah Smith's got 1 more year of eligibility in college.
Wild. Now, eligibility versus draft eligibility, right?
He's a true sophomore, so 26 is off the table.
Come out.
He can't. No.
Oh, he can't. Then this idea totally falls apart unless you treat it like they were chasing Arch. Because if Arch doesn't come out next year, then you just trade back in the first round again for another first round pick, and you get ready for 2027. So either way, I'm saying, if let's just say they accidentally figure out their quarterback, whether Shedeur or somebody else, I like what's there if you don't need quarterback. Now, everybody relax. I'm excited about it. Not everybody's going to be.
Okay.
But even those of us that are excited about it, pump the brakes. Let this kid just get to work and don't add any pressure to him. Don't make this a big internet circus. Don't do the things where everyone's like, Shedeur's going to let the process run its course and see what happens. He might be quarterback 4 this year for all we know. I just like the possibility, and it's all on the field. There is a lot of stuff off the field, but on the field, he is the best quarterback in this draft class to run that system.
Well, Browns are going to do what Browns are going to do. Browns fans are going to do what they're going to do. Last point that I have to make on this before we move on to some other stuff here is that the NFL, in true Roger Goodell fashion, to borrow that line from The Office, this could have been done by an email. They're with the schedule release, right? I can't wait for the schedule release because I'm just hoping in my black heart here when it comes to the Browns, I'm hoping on the Big 12 schedule that Colorado is playing at Cincinnati. Please let the Browns play at Cincinnati the next day. I want to see that. I want the daily double where Dion doesn't even have to travel to go to a Browns game. That would be awesome. Did they play at Cincinnati, Jason, this year? I hope, please.
By the way, I was never going to bring this up unless there was an opportunity because someone brought up the University of Cincinnati, and since you've done so.
Okay.
University of Cincinnati football.
Uh-huh.
I don't want to be too incendiary here, get any of you in trouble.
Okay.
Get your coaches under control. Because if I cover another Colorado game and another Cincinnati football coach decides to hop the fence, chase me down, and assault me on the way to stadium security where they tell you to fuck off,
wow,
I'm going to sue the shit out of you.
Wow. This is that escalated quickly.
Yeah, it what it was. Here's the long story of it, right? I have a god niece type situation who is now, of college age.
Okay.
She has committed to the University of Cincinnati on a full athletic scholarship for their track team.
Okay.
So as I'm walking along the sideline, I think, oh, I bet she'd love to get a nice picture of like all the Bearcat helmets with the lights shining off of it or whatever. So I'm walking full speed. And anyone who knows anything about photography will know that how ridiculous this is. As I'm walking, I literally take my camera, actual camera, not my phone. And just as I'm walking, I just go like this, click. I didn't look in the viewfinder. I didn't focus. I didn't do anything. It was a random shot of helmets. And an assistant coach starts screaming, hops up I don't even know how you do that, but hops over the barricade into the stands and is basically treating my equipment bag that I have over my shoulders like a tackling dummy. And he's like driving me and like knocking me into rails and shit. And I had every ounce of me said, take this camera and just bash him in the face with it. And I just let it go. And I wait till we get to security. And then he throws this super fit. He's like, I want him arrested. He thought that who's the douchebag in Michigan?
Oh, yeah. I know you mean. The guy that spied on all the practices.
Yeah. So he was like, you know about that.
Yeah.
So that's what I was worried about. And I'm like, I don't work for you. Yeah. I don't work for the University of Colorado. And I don't know if you know anything about cameras, but I don't have the technological ability to send the team shit.
Yeah. Okay.
So it was this big ordeal. And then like campus security kept coming around to me and they're like, man, are you all right? I'm so sorry this happened to you. And dude, for like 3 months, I was seriously thinking about contacting them. Like, wow, I'll describe them to you, but you need to fire that son of a bitch.
Well,
so there you go. It's just one of those things. If this happens to get to them, if somebody happens to see it, I'm not starting trouble, but get your house in order.
Kelsey brothers, get that school under control. Be good for something here.
It's surprising because clearly you had press credentials and all that stuff.
Oh, absolutely,
so it's like, dude, we take pictures around the stadium.
Yeah,
like
to that point. If I want to get a shot of your call sheet, there's a way for me to do that.
Yeah,
you're not going to see me because I'm going to be 300 feet that way.
Right.
Coming at a downward angle, zoomed in with a telephoto that you're not going to be able to know.
Right.
So there's a whole logic that didn't make sense. There's also an understanding of the situation. And let's be honest, and this is me twisting a knife.
Okay.
They were getting their ass whipped. With about 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter. This was a testosterone up former football player who was in his feelings and decided he was going to take it out on somebody based on an assumption that a fraction of a second later should have left his head.
Wow. Yeah. You gotta watch those teed up coaches there, Jason. All that roid rage coming right at you is something to be reckoned with here clearly. So bringing up here for those catching the video version of this, the 2025 FDH NFL post-draft rankings. You can find us on the main page right at the top at fantasydrafthelp.com. So going through here and going to use this as a little bit of a basis for analysis here. The first column, and this is the one that really means the least ultimately. This is the value only. So it's essentially where were the players that were taken on the Jason Jones top 50 overall in Pro Football Draftology 2025, also available on the main page at fantasydrafthelp.com. Cleveland, who had a lot of picks early on, unsurprisingly leading the way, 236 points, first place. New York Giants, in terms of value, 174 in second, Atlanta third, Seattle fourth, Baltimore fifth. Your bottom five, there's a big tie for 0 points. So there were 0 players taken in the Jason Jones top 50 by Detroit, Houston, the LA Rams, and Minnesota. Tampa Bay was in 28th place. In the value and needs column, this one I think is a lot more meaningful. This is one where, did you try to fill your needs during the draft? And if so, what was the value you got of players on the Jason Jones top 50? Your top 5 on this. New England won, a tie for second between Kansas City and Las Vegas. Cleveland 4th, Tennessee 5th. Counting our way up from the bottom, Minnesota 0 points, Washington 31, Miami 30. Another disappointing draft. Thanks for nothing, Chris Greer. 29th is Jacksonville. 28th is the LA Rams. Team needs, the third column over. This is just based on filling the proportion of needs that you had coming in. Philadelphia also did this by signing some of their own free agents in the days leading up to the draft here. Philadelphia leads the way at number 1. Las Vegas number 2, New England number 3, a tie for 4th between the New York Jets and Tennessee. All of these teams did very well on filling needs. As a matter of fact, I think I may have New England as a wild card for next year, and I may have Las Vegas not far behind, shockingly. At the bottom, Minnesota again with 0 points. What a steaming turd of a draft from the Minnesota Vikings. It cannot be said often enough. 0 points here. Not much better of a turd by the Dolphins, and it pains me to say this. They're in 31st place, Washington 30, Detroit 29, and then in a tie for 26th place, three-way tie, Atlanta, Jacksonville, and the LA Rams. In the final column here, you can see how I ended up doing the first version of draft rankings, or I'm sorry, not draft rankings, but power rankings for the 2025 NFL season, and it may be a little bit controversial in some places based on how I slotted some of the teams here, but I'm going to throw it to you guys. I'll start with you, Chris, as far as any thoughts, any real surprises when you took a look at this as far as how the winners and losers shook out in the various categories.
I think terribly surprising. I mean, I understand the system that you painstakingly put together every year. More times than not, every year we tend to end up with these great grades for the Browns, and it never works out. So
development. It's development. You have to develop players.
I always end up questioning the entire thing. I was thinking about the draft, and there were some teams that I thought really had great drafts. Again, I thought the Browns had a great draft. I thought the Patriots had a great draft.
Yes.
For what they wanted. I really like what they did. Then I have teams that I really hate. I hated the Panthers draft. I'm sorry. I just couldn't figure out what the hell they were doing there.
Got a great receiver, though. You guys outvote me on that, but they got a great receiver.
I thought that the Chargers continue to build a Harbaugh team, right? That sort of tough-nosed approach. I really like what I like what they did in terms of who they are and what they're trying to be. I thought the Chiefs had a great draft. I liked Ashton Gillott out of Louisville. Norman, the defensive lineman out of Tennessee. Look, we don't know if Josh Simmons comes back from injury, but if he does, they got a left tackle at the end of the first. That could be great. So, I really liked what they did. Jacksonville, they're like a winner and a loser, right? They're a loser because metrics say they gave up too much. But they also got an amazing player in Travis Hunter. And then I didn't really like anything they did until late in the fourth when they got Jack Kaiser, the linebacker. And then I didn't like anything until the very end of the draft when they got the running back out of Syracuse, Allen.
They did not draft for need very much. Not a lot of need drafting.
Yeah, I liked the running back there late in the 7th round that they got. But everything else they did, I was kind of like, eh. The Falcons giving up a 1 next year to come back up and get another pass rusher in Pierce, a guy with some character issue problems. I think that kind of makes them a loser. I didn't like what I didn't like what Maryland did. Miami did.
Yeah.
I didn't like what Minnesota did. There were a bunch in my mind that were real losers. That I just didn't think that they didn't seem to know what the hell they were doing. I thought the Giants did pretty well, right?
Yes. Yes, they did.
I don't know that Jackson Dart is going to be the guy. I have a lot of questions about him.
Me too. But everything else. But
I love Darius Alexander out of Toledo.
Yeah.
I love What's his Scattaboo out of Arizona State. I mean, again, I don't think he's an every down back, but I think he's a tough nosed kid that you can throw out there. They got Abdul Carter. Maybe that makes one of those, Thibodeau a trade bait for them. Um, so I liked what the Giants did. So there were a bunch of teams, I was kind of all over the place that, I thought some did really well. And then there were a bunch I did like Minnesota and Carolina and Miami that I thought, it was kind of like cat vomit. I mean, I just didn't
Yeah.
like it. Once again, I thought the Eagles had, again, a solid draft.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they got the linebacker out of Alabama that you wanted so desperately to go to Sean McDermott. They got that safety out of Texas. What was the other one that they got that I really liked? They ended up with Cameron Williams late in the draft.
Yeah.
That was another one. Oh, and they got Kyle McCord, a guy that I think has got some developable potential there. So I liked what Philly did. So, overall, those were the teams that kind of really jumped out for me.
The nicest thing I can say about Kyle McCord is he can't suck worse than Kenny Pickett. So I guess that's a tiny upgrade there. But when we're looking at the teams here, and again, the last part of the sheet that we have here are post NFL draft rankings, where I've got the power rankings for next year. You look at the remaining needs. Number one in my power rankings, Philadelphia. They clawed it down to one need. It's almost unheard of for me to see teams less than two needs. Now, I will say this is the fifth year in a row of tracking this where the needs per team has come down. 5 years ago, it was like 5 needs or so remaining per team. We've clawed it down to like 3.88 on there. So way to go, NFL GMs. You are increasingly realizing you need to fill holes in the draft. Congratulations. Would you like a cookie? But as this is happening, we're starting to see teams, Philadelphia 1 in my power rankings, New England, this might shock some people, 11 in my power rankings. They only have one need remaining on my board. Las Vegas, only one need remaining. I have them number 12. I've got the LA Chargers number 2 because I have them as only having 2 needs remaining after the draft. Where have you gone, LA Chargers, stars and scrubs extraordinaire franchise? They've been that for as long as I can remember. And they've got a really, really solid roster, the best I can remember in some time. Jason, I want to get some thoughts from you on your winners and losers from the draft.
Okay. Right out of the gate, the New England, right? I think this is one of those talking points that's probably not going to get mentioned enough.
Mm-hmm.
This draft, in general, you can take all the stars and names out of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a draft where you get either, and this is the Jacksonville argument, you either get stars, and there's not many of them, or you get starters. And New England said, well, we don't need to worry about any of the star part of it. And every single pick, seemingly in their entire draft, felt like that's a guy I could see developing into a starter. They're literally reshaping that entire team. And I think it's a really interesting way to look at it when you consider who the coach is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Vrabel is going to want I feel like Vrabel is going to take the Belichick thing and go on a little tangent, right? Where, yeah, it's still kind of the Patriot way,
Mm-hmm.
but it's going to be very specific on mentality, approach, grit, and all that type of stuff. And I think their draft reflects that. The other one that's real big, the picks aren't big, but it's a team I don't think is going to get talked about much, and that's Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is going to depend on what you like or what you're looking for or what you think they're going to be good at. But considering that, this is not Legion of Boom anymore. It's not Russ Wilson's team anymore. But to go Greg Zabel, right, the Swiss Army knife offensive lineman from North Dakota State.
Yeah.
You could literally play him at left tackle just as well as you could play him at center. They grabbed in the second round Emin Wari, who's a guy Chris and I both really love, at safety. Elijah Arroyo was probably tight end 4 in the whole draft. And then while I was intrigued by it for us, it wasn't a system fit. It might be a system fit there. They went ahead and pulled the trigger on Jalen Milroe. Now, the rest of it's, I like Torrey Horton from Colorado State, but, that is a guy that I'm not quite sure I know what his role will be yet. And then there was one other, this one, almost every year we got to do this. So, Chris, I apologize in advance. Let me get it pulled up real quick. Just so I don't quote anything.
This ought to be a good one.
Malachi Stark.
Is he going to take a shot at the 49ers for taking
I'm
a
sure.
Bobcat?
Yeah, Bobcat, baby.
Malachi Starks. Arguably the best safety in the draft. Mike Green has some off-the-field concerns, but is an extremely talented edge rusher. Emory Jones, who I had higher than most at offensive tackle. Teddy Buchanan from California. Carson Vinson from Alabama A&M I had significantly higher than most everybody else. And he drafted my favorite Colorado Buffalo, not named Travis Hunter, in LeJontay Wester.
Okay.
Baltimore, I hate you.
Well, I apologize for speaking into existence on our pre-draft show. When Chris put us on the spot, I mentioned Malachi Starks. I ended up having him in my mock draft in the draft guide. Unfortunately, I spoke that into reality. Idiot GMs will always let players fall to the Ravens. The funny thing is, in talking to Joe Stazak, our great FDH Lounge dignitary at the end of the draft, I said to him, you are essentially the NFC equivalent of that. I said, not that Howie Roseman doesn't do great things, but like everybody in the NFC curses all the general managers for letting everybody fall to Philadelphia as well. So it also happens to a team that doesn't push our hate buttons as much as Baltimore does.
I got no problem for rooting for Philadelphia from time to time.
Sure.
But that needs to be mentioned too. Okay.
Yeah.
And I understand that being fans of a team that is less successful, it's going to sound like sour grapes. That's probably what it is. Jalen Carter.
I think it's good that you mentioned Seattle. That was an oversight on my part. I actually, that was another team that I really liked what they did.
Here's my only problem, though.
I thought Seattle did really well.
They had like 10 needs coming in. They let a lot of guys go in the offseason. So I agree with you guys, but this is their first down payment on rebuilding. They got a long ways to go. I don't like them in 2025, not because I disagree with you guys. I agree with you guys, but they made this a minimum of a 2 or 3 year rebuild by letting all the guys go.
Well, real quick, Rick,
they were kind of in the same boat. I think like the 49ers. The 49ers lost a lot of guys because salary cap problems, right? I mean,
yes.
The 49ers are going through the same thing.
Yes.
But I thought the 49ers are another team that, look, they were like, we're losing all these defensive players, fine. And they just went and they drafted a ton of solid defensive players,
They reloaded. they did.
Well,
even CJ West in the 4th round out of Indiana, I was like, damn, they are. I mean, the 49ers are really, they're just going to work. They're like, yeah, okay, we can lose all these defensive players. We are just going to go and draft hard at it. And then, of course, taking our guy Curtis Rourke late in the draft made me happy. I think if anybody, I think he could fit a Shanahan offense really well. And the question of whether or not they're going to pay Brock Purdy the $60 million or whatever he wants remains to be seen. I suspect they're not going to.
Whoa. Okay. Well, by the way, FDH Lounge dignitary Russ Cohen did not like it when I told him, who's going to be the guy to pay Brock Purdy $500 million? It's going to be the Jets. He didn't like that at all.
Hey, guys. Real quick on Philadelphia, because I know that our disdain is with Baltimore, and it'll always be that way.
Sure.
But I want to point out the Philly problem.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Nakobe Dean, Keely Ringo. I'll let Quinyon Mitchell go. I'm not going to include him in that, but it's really close. Azeez Ojulari and now Jihad Campbell.
Mm-hmm.
That is like 70% of their defense,
Yeah.
and they are all incredible players. And you know what they all have in common?
SEC, baby. And top flight SEC.
Ain't no way in hell none of them players should have been available when Philly was picking.
Yeah. Now, I mean, Jalen Carter, I mean, death. I mean, that was like special circumstances, right? But like the other ones, yeah.
If it's that, or it's Lael Collins, or it's Laramie Tunsil type draft day shenanigans or issues, like, okay, we'll give you that one.
Right.
But why is it every single year there's some guy that the overwhelming internet consensus was that dude's a top 15 pick, and then these sons of guns go and pick him at 31 and 32?
Well, and that's the whole thing here too, is that what teams will not only reach, but and again, and I'm a proponent of filling needs, but also value also too. You cannot reach with a guy that like should be a third round pick, but it's a position of need. But you get teams that are doing this. I mean, I felt like Minnesota really reached on some of their picks here this year. That's why my grade score for them was so atrocious. They're going to fall off next year, and they may fall off viciously. They just waved bye to Sam Darnold. So, you've got that coming in. They did nothing to help themselves. Chicago did a lot to help themselves. They've had a heck of an off season. Green Bay, I felt like
a lot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Green Bay, I feel like they might be one of the biggest winners of the draft because I feel like they're the team. I don't know if you guys agree. I think they might be the team closest to Philadelphia right now in the NFC. Like getting a slam dunk, star wide receiver in that offense there. I've been waiting for them to get they've been on the verge the last year or two. They've got cap room, and it's like, when are they going to be aggressive and really kind of go for it? And it feels like the pack is sort of turning the page going into next year. Do either of you guys agree with me that like Green Bay catapulted themselves maybe to the front along with Philadelphia?
Their draft is really interesting, but it's I want to say a third of the teams did this, where you'll look at their whole draft haul and you'll go, I love rounds 1 through 4 or 1 through 3. And then you go, it kind of falls apart at the end. But Matthew Golden, Anthony Belton, who I think Chris and I both had kind of higher as an offensive tackle out of NC State. Savion Williams from TCU was a receiver a lot of people undervalued. And Baron Sorrell from Texas. Those 4 in a row are really solid. And then if we take a moment and look at the non-rookie roster, I believe they're going to find a whole bunch of other stuff I like. So, obviously, the quarterback's good enough, right? No one has an issue with Jordan Love at this point.
No.
Josh Jacobs was a brilliant acquisition.
Yes, he was.
The offensive line is relatively solid. They haven't been together for a long time, but they're solid. Mm-hmm. And then when you look at that receiver core, right, I think Matthew Golden's the most exciting one.
Yep.
But Matthew Golden, Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, and now Savion Williams gets added to that.
And he bumps everybody down. Golden bumps everybody down a spot, which is beautiful. Yeah.
He's just fantastic. And then keep going. The defensive line is good. The linebackers are solid. The corners aren't like scaring offensive coordinators, but they're also not going to lose games for you. So, if you're looking at this from like a whole what they've been doing and what they look like as an entire team, you say that in the wrong crowds, people are going to look at you funny, but it's not that far-fetched.
Yeah, no, and I think they're ahead of Detroit right now, too. Detroit has to replace both of their coordinators coming into next year. I didn't think they did a whole lot to help themselves in the draft here. How do you see that, Chris?
Go ahead, Chris.
This draft was interesting. I like what the Packers and the Bears have done.
Mm-hmm.
In the offseason. I agree with you that Minnesota seems like they've taken a step back there. I am interested though, in Green Bay, and this is where, somebody like Andrew Berry is pretty decent. Could Watkins be available in Green Bay with 1 year left on his contract? A trade, Green Bay's gone and they've gone and got all these other wide receivers. Would Green Bay be willing to move him? I don't think they've been totally happy with him.
You know about Christian?
Yeah.
Oh,
that's I just I wonder what he would look like though outside of there. I mean, you drop him in Cleveland. I don't know. I just I would
I'm
wonder.
just saying that, like, I think he's now potentially available.
Sure, and he's better than what the
That's what
Browns
that
got.
draft said to me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he would be the automatic wide receiver too, day one.
yeah. I don't know what the upside of that is, but yeah, it would be an improvement over a position they neglected, which is kind of weird to me because they've kept putting draft capital in it in recent years to very little effect. I mean, the only two guys that have really had an effect there have been outsiders, Cooper and Judy, who they ended up acquiring. So developing wide receivers has been the ongoing kind of, morass for them, among other things. But it's interesting that this is the year
And they
they
haven't
give
put
up
any
on it.
real draft capital into wide receivers.
Not
It's like
first round though. Not
third
first.
round and down. They've been
Yeah,
spending
And I think we can
money
all
on it.
agree that Barry is awful with third round wide receivers.
yeah. But it just well, and then you go for a guy like DPJ, who I actually did understand the whole value of that. That this is a guy that was a 5-star college recruit. I'm always a believer in pedigree, but that was a thing where they just gave up on him and flipped him for, you guessed it, a 6th round pick. So
I was about to say, make sure you use the operative phrase. They gave up on him.
They did. I mean, and is there any other organization that's like, oh, those 5th and 6th round picks, they're like gold, Jerry. They're gold. Like I don't get that at all.
We saw on day one this year.
Yeah.
Barry flipped like 3 6-rounders and a 5th rounder to move like 10 spots.
Yeah.
If he loves them that much, he's the only one that thinks they're that valuable.
The only thing they're good for is trading up. Like if you can use I always consider the 4th round to be sort of the cutoff of where you can expect to get a starter in here. And so on the whole criteria here for filling needs, my grades are if you did it in the first 4 rounds, because you might get a guy that, maybe he's a diamond in the rough later on or whatever, but I don't see that as being the same thing. If you're going 5th round, 6th round, 7th round, there's a reason they were still there. 4th round, to me, it may seem arbitrary and not every year's draft is the same one, but that's how I kind of apply it as I'm looking at this here. So
what's funny, when we were still thinking, most teams at the top of the first were going to just stand and pick.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't going to be a whole lot of movement.
Yeah.
And you guys have heard this from me so many times before. I don't believe that 10, 11, 12 rookies were going to make the Cleveland 53-man roster, which I'm sure you can make that argument for a bunch of other teams too.
Right.
So this was one of those drafts where I'm like, if we're picking it 2 and Travis is up there, and I really love, and Rick, you can attest to this based on how we laid the draft guide out. Like, this isn't one of those drafts where you've got so much talent on day 3, especially not in the 6th and 7th. So my dream often, and definitely this year, was turn those 11 picks into like 6 or 7 picks.
Of course. Yeah, trade up.
Now, there will be drafts where the best thing to do is to not do that and go the other way. I just thought this draft was a trade up more than a trade back situation. But hey, man, when you look at what New England did and some of these other teams that acknowledged that this is a stars and starters draft, and they were like, screw it, we're just going to load up on starters. And there's a bunch of these traditionally successful teams, New England, Green Bay, I'm drawing a blank here, the LA Chargers, if you want to sort of chalk that one more up to this is a Harbaugh is essentially creating a Harbaugh-like team. Right. I think you put them in that category too. And it was just nice to see that some of those typically successful teams understood the assignment.
Yeah, true. There were a lot of them that did. And again, the needs per team is down across the board as far as an average goes, but there are still some teams that have a lot of needs remaining. Chief among them, 7 needs per team. Unfortunately, the Dolphins, thanks for Mutton, 7 needs. Minnesota 7.
For you, man.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I thought Grant was solid, but then everything after that made me question, like, well, then why'd you pick Grant there?
They make me question my very existence, Jason, watching them in a draft. I've had enough. Minnesota 7 needs, Seattle 7 needs, and Dallas with 6 needs. So. Yeah, watching Miami is soul crushing. Yeah. What were you saying, Jason?
It feels like
None.
it would only happen to you that you would decide that you've had enough of a relationship and move on to someone else and find out that someone else gives you stress too.
Yeah, well, I mean, at least it's honest suckitude on that part.
Different kind of stress.
It's just a bad general manager. I mean, that's the whole, I mean, that's after the kind of toxic chaos, from before, it's almost a relief to have that be the case. Although I'd rather they had a great general manager who was worthy of Mike McDaniel and won't get him fired. But that's another story for another time.
Yeah, Rick, real quick, it's just something I heard earlier today that it just did make me laugh, and it's me looking at this lightheartedly. With Deshaun Watson looking like he's no longer a factor.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard it from non-Browns fans saying it too. It's like, I bet Browns fans are really excited because they're going to have a quarterback that doesn't have an Instagram presence.
Yeah.
Yeah, about that.
Well, I mean, I've heard the saying, if you have 2 quarterbacks, that means you don't have one.
Yep.
I'll say this, if you have 5 quarterbacks, it means you don't have one. So we'll see what materializes out of that. But any remaining thoughts from the draft that we didn't get to? I'll start with you, Chris.
I agree with Jason. I hate when the teams, if I was a GM, I would be taking those 6th and 7th rounders and packaging and always trying to get up.
Yes.
Or what the Browns did, where they moved a couple to get up to move them up to become a 5th rounder next year, right? So yeah, they picked up that 1st rounder with the trade with the Jaguars, but they also picked up a 5th rounder later in the draft for next year. So who knows? Maybe that 5th rounder is going to be paired with the 6th and moved up next year and becomes a 4th. I mean, I don't know why more teams do that, because the reality is when we get into camp and we get into these teams, it's like you get 12 guys in a draft. Those 12 guys aren't making your team.
No.
Yeah, so you got to be a really bad team to keep 12 guys, to keep 12 rookies.
Yeah, to me, I'm like, you should be like targeting 6 or 7 good guys and try to burn those later picks to move up and get better spots in all your rounds, especially in those, that 4th and 5th round. Burn those later ones, because statistically those players are much less likely to ever help you.
By the way, can I just say this? This is a thought that I literally just had now. But those guys, I don't know about 5th round, but at least 6th round, 7th round, they're closer to being undrafted free agents than they are, 4th round picks, whatever. They're definitely closer. Every team brings in undrafted free agents to camp. Plus, there's always guys that slip through the cracks that are worthy. If you're on the phone in the first hour or 2 or 3 after the draft, you can be getting camp invites out to a bunch of these guys here. So it's like, the 6th and 7th round picks to me are almost kind of redundant in that way. If you're doing your scouting effectively, you can probably find just as many guys who got passed over altogether as whoever you spent your precious capital on in the 6th or 7th round. So,
there's an interesting thing when you talk about the process of the scouting.
Yeah.
That I feel like it's not a big deal and it's completely unrelated, but I still feel like it's an indicator of this concept.
Okay.
When I'm projecting 1st round draft picks,
and
Rick, you've seen this for over a decade. There are guys at the top where it's like that's a top 3 pick.
Okay.
And it's like this is a top 10 pick. This is a top 20 pick, right? When you get to the ass end of the draft, the bulk of the players from the 3rd round or the 6th round on typically have a designation of like, this guy, I believe, will go somewhere between the 6th round and being undrafted.
Yep.
That is a 2+ round window. Yep. Whereas the guys at the top, you're like, no, I know this guy fits this exact range.
Great point.
Anything outside of this is ridiculous. Whereas these other guys, you're like, take a flyer if you want. I'm not saying that he's going to be great, and I'm not saying he's an Amazon delivery guy. I'm saying I have no idea where he falls in there because he doesn't have those traits that you would look for in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round. So just based on how we position him, it's still dicier.
Yeah.
And if you're bringing 3 or 4 guys into camp that are all in that 6th, 7th, or undrafted range, they're just fodder for camp.
Yep. I would agree with that. By the way, I have a closing question here, Jason. There was something that occurred to me today in a conversation with FDH Lounge dignitary John Adams. I'm looking at this with the team needs, and that being Jacksonville. While I think it was obviously brilliant for them to get Hunter to take advantage of the Browns' willingness to trade, inexplicable willingness to trade out of that spot. So bravo, Tony Khan. You're not just a great wrestling promoter, you're also a great front office figure. But beyond that, looking at this, Jacksonville, they have a remaining need at safety. They didn't really have one at cornerback. So if they're putting their defensive packages together, I'm looking at this like, I think Hunter would probably be at more risk physically if they tried to jam him in as safety on some packages, because what better example than his old coach Deion Sanders, right? He was a floater on the run, wasn't he, famously? I mean, this was a guy that didn't really get too much involved in making tackles he didn't have to make. So, I mean, Travis Hunter as a cornerback versus if they try to play him at safety to fill a need there, leaving aside what his skill set is best for. I mean, I think he could still be above average at safety just because he's so great physically. But like, my guess is that puts him at more risk for both sides of the ball because of what you have to deal with at safety. Am I right about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now let's not paint him as fragile.
Right. I'm not saying. I'm just talking risk.
Tackles where you go, oh, I didn't know he had that in you.
Yeah.
But I think what we're talking about is the consistency of it, the probability of it, right?
Yes.
So if you're going to put him at safety, and I've had an idea about this that I kind of half stole from Tyvis Powell.
Okay.
But if you're going to play him fully both ways, and it seems like Jacksonville's willing to do that, he's wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, whatever. On defense, though, you can make him cornerback 2, and you can put him out on an island, and that's fine. But if you don't want to do that, running basically a 4-2-5 type setup allows you to have that additional defensive back. And if it was me, just to manage the logistics of meetings and all that stuff, I would just make him a robber, essentially.
Okay.
Right? He's a corner and he's playing defense, but you don't have to worry about route concepts or covering this guy and falling all over the field. At least early on, I would say, see ball, go get ball.
Okay.
But to your point, the last thing I would want him to do to start out is to put him in a position where you got to thump running backs.
Yeah, that's kind of what
that I would rather him be kind of in the back, just trying to pick off balls.
Yep.
If you want to give him more of a free range type role, I would rather his free range be hawking balls out of midair than it is being a box safety, basically.
Oh, geez, no, certainly not that. Chris, you got any thoughts on that?
Not beyond. I mean, Jason knows better than I in terms of usage on Travis. I mean, again, I think it's very possible that he could play both ways. In the NFL. It was part of the reason I was excited about it. I do think I'll be stunned if the Jaguars don't focus on, say, wide receiver and then slowly bring him along on the other side of the ball. I think they're going to want. I think any team I think is going to want him to prove that he can do what he says he can do. That's all. I think every team would have approached it the same way. It doesn't mean he won't be able to. I just think he's going to have to. They're not just going to go, okay, you're going to play both.
Okay.
My impression was always, whether I was thinking about it for the Browns or anybody else, he's got to be able to prove it.
Yep.
And then they have to determine what that balance is, right? Now, one thing I never said, even though Travis would, is I don't see him playing 100% of snaps on both sides full game. Like,
of course,
at some point, I think you take what he is and you drop it a notch and you say, okay, I want you playing 80% of snaps or whatever, right?
Sure.
But the thing with it is, I'm one of those fans that when I'm so locked in to the level I was locked in on Travis to Cleveland at 2, like I feel like I've been subconsciously dumped or something, right? So for the first 2 days, I wouldn't even look at a picture with Travis in a Jacksonville uniform. But I did bring myself to watch part of the introductory press conference. And you know how people always say Browns will Browns?
Yeah. I say that.
if we believe this about this conversation we're having about Travis and how any team's going to have to figure out that balance and you got to prove it. And if I'm one of these coaches, I'm telling him in training camp, I'm throwing everything in the kitchen sink at you. I'm trying to prove to you can't do it. And then if he comes out the other side, that's great. Jacksonville, in that press conference, they acted as if the drafting of him is them sending like an identifying message of who they're about to become. And they basically said, we're letting him do whatever he wants. If he wants to go every play on both, so be it. And even I'm going,
gee whiz, yeah.
Like, what are we doing? Like, there's nothing wrong getting up there and say we have every intention of him playing both ways.
Sure.
But don't specify to the level that, like, oh, he can play whatever he wants.
Yeah.
Still a 21-year-old kid that, and we all know college is different.
Yeah.
Now, I think the game moves slower, especially when you come from a team that's running tempo most of the time. Yeah. But the hits are harder. The plays are more complicated. The other players are better. You know, all that stuff is something you got to factor in. So I was hoping that they would just be very vague and say, yeah, he's going to play both ways, but we'll figure that out. But the way it came across was, Travis is like the new mascot of the Jaguars.
Yeah.
And that's what we are. We're changing. We're going outside the borders of what's normal. And it's like, okay, you're leaning too far into this now.
Well, and I will say my closing thoughts on that are that this being the Jaguars with Tony Khan, one of his employees, the Attitude Era guy, Billy Gunn, badass Billy Gunn. I got 5 words for you. Mike Tice, the Randy ratio. Okay. You don't want to specify too much on these things, right? Yeah. History has shown us. So, but history has shown us that, again, between what we saw Thursday night in real time, go back and check it out because it was a gem. Clearly, this was going to be as well. First of all, I got the best 2 draft analysts in the biz along with me. This has been the best team doing this since 2012 when the 3 of us first started breaking this down. But with all the material that we had to work with, again, a real gem in its own right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Jason Jones, Chris Galloway, Rick Morris, your original FDH Lounge dignitaries, thanking you for checking out FDH Lounge mini episode 1828.